Hi everyone, welcome to our online meetup today. So very happy to have you all here. Let me start by introducing our community. So we are a group of cybersecurity who came together to learn, share, and grow in this field. So we will host a regular online meetup and invite talented and experienced people to share their knowledge and insights. So if you know anyone who's great in this cybersecurity domain, please let me know. We'd love to connect with them. And you can follow us on LinkedIn to stay in the loop. And we also upload some previous recordings to the YouTube channel. So if you have time, you can check it. By the way, we also offer some service like career coaching if you're not clear about your career path, CV polish, interview mock-up, and a study group. So if you're curious or want to know more, please feel free to reach out to me. So let's get started from today's topic. Next slide, please. So today, our topic is GRC Career Path by Chris. Chris is a very experienced staff in Deloitte. So this speech will last about 40 minutes, and we will have a Q&A section. So hand over to you, Chris.
Right. Thanks, Bella. I'll share my screen. So firstly, good afternoon and good morning and good afternoon. Thanks for your time in joining this session. So I think today I'll briefly touch base on governance, risk and compliance, GRC, in regards to what are they and what would the actual GRC work be looking like in the workplace. And also I'll share some of my thoughts in regards to the learning path and also how to find a job in the GRC space. Right, I'll move to the next page. Right, so that's the agenda for today. We do have QA session at the end of this session. So if you do have any questions during the call, note them down. I'll answer them later. Right, a bit of introduction about myself. So I'm a director at Deloitte. So I'm looking after emerging technology security. So I'm also holding a national role in OT security. So if you do, I'm not sure if we have colleagues from Deloitte during this call. So as you can see, I'm specialized in GRC, operational technology security, and also network security. So my career path, so I started my career as a network security engineer in an MSP, and then moved on to one of the leading telecommunication company as a security architect. And then I was working in a IT consulting company as a cybersecurity consultant. And then at Deloitte, that's when I stepped into a leadership role up until now. So although you can see some of my certificates, I have CCIE security, HCIE, CSSP, and GISSP, and etc. So the reason why I want to show my certificates is because I just want to know that I'm not the typical or traditional GRC consultant. Because most of those traditional consultants, they started their career in consulting company like Big Four. They probably never had a chance to know what a real firewall looks like. But I have to say that my technical background does help me a lot during my consulting journey at Deloitte and also in the other companies that I worked before. So lastly, here is my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to send me a connection and also leave me messages if you have any questions. I'll answer them when I got a chance. Right on. I'll move to the next page. Right. So governance. I'll start with some explanation in regards to what is cybersecurity governance. So so governance, cybersecurity governance can be break into like strategy, policies, process, procedures, and also organizational cultures, structures and cultures. So those are all about, upper level, security policies that the company, or rules that runs the company, in the from the security lens. And this is really important. That's because those strategies, policies, and processes, they are interpreting, the business objective into a security objective. So let's take an example. Like Coast, I think all of us will go to Coast for shopping. So do you know what is the business objective of Coast? I don't think Coast is to sell firewall, or they have a reason to buy firewall. So in a simple sense, so their business objective is to go to work, get a customer to buy their product, make profit, and go home. Very simple. So how security will help to boost their business objective and also protect this business objective. So that's something that we need to think of. And that also work very closely with the jobs. You see a lot of jobs posted by a lot of companies. So they need pen testers, they need SOC analysts, so they network security engineers. Why they need those security jobs? The reason behind that is all those jobs, all the security controls that they put into place, is to serve their business objectives. So, which is also very important. And that like policies and process and procedures, they are also a type of controls, where we call it administrative controls. So they are as important as the technical controls, such as the firewalls, IPS, Active Directory. So in the next page, I'll touch base on what some examples of what the governance looks like. So this is a very good example from federal government's cybersecurity strategy, which is published in 2023, if my memory is right. So you can see on the left, so this strategy sets out a very clear objective. So it says, by 2013, Australia will be a world leader in cybersecurity, and to achieve this vision, we need to protect Australians, and also, it's underpinned by 6 shells. So these 6 shells are a sort of, cybersecurity strategy to achieve the, I probably wouldn't say the business objective, because the vision or the objective from the Australian government is not like business objective, but it's very similar. So those 6 strategies, security strategies, to support, the objective, or this country's objective. So, and on the right, on the top right, so you see the federal government break it down into 3 phases. So that's sort of like a roadmap. So how to achieve it in a phase, in different phases. And those are the a very good example that we might need to learn and keep in mind that if we are going to do a security strategy by ourselves, those are the essential elements that we need to include in our report, in our documentation. Right, I'll move to the next one. So I think some people would wonder what does policy, process, procedure look like. So I have a very simple examples here. So this is a data security policy. So the policy says confidential information must be properly protected. So you probably see that this is very high level. So that's a very high level directive that apply to all staff. And this is what the policy, policy should be drafted. It needs to be high level, and also it needs to apply to all staff. So all the people within that company can understand what they need to do. So this policy mandates, it mandates an initiative that it will be conducted by all the staff. But I think some people might ask then, how will we achieve that? So that's where the process comes into play. So in the industry, some people will also call it like standards or even the standard process, but they're pretty much talks about the same thing. So like I said, the process is to support the policy. So so it gives like further details on how to achieve it. So so likewise, we're still on this data security policy. So how to achieve that? The process example is all customer info transmitted over internet must be protected by the IPsec VPN. So that's a very detailed initiative regarding how to achieve the policy, how to protect the confidentiality, the confidential information by IPsec VPN. And then lastly, procedure. So procedure is a step-by-step procedure to implement the IPsec VPN technologies. So if we say we're gonna use IPsec VPN to protect the data in transition, then how do we achieve that? So firstly, we might need to buy the IPsec VPN gateway at each of the sites, and then we should properly configure the IPsec VPN by using, for example, like AES or by using the PKI and etc. So that's a more like step-by-step procedure to achieve the process. So that's what policy, process, and procedure looks like. So you will come across this when you are doing any kinds of this governance work in the workplace. So in the next slides, so that's a bit of brief on the job duties, or as a GRC consultant, what will you do in the workplace? So obviously, like I said, we might need to write cybersecurity strategy reports, like the Australian federal government cybersecurity reports, and also with roadmaps. We might need to conduct a gap analysis against like industry good practices, standards, and come up with findings and recommendations. Then obviously, we need to write the security policies, those examples that you see in the previous slides. That's something we might need to write. We might also need to audit the existing strategy, policy, and process. And we also might need to write the reports, including our findings and recommendations. So lastly, we might need to review and refine those existing policies, process, and procedure. That's part of the job duties that you will run into if you're a GRC consultant. But also, I think you probably see in the first slide I mentioned about organizational structure and culture. That's also part of the work that a GRC consultant or even like chief cybersecurity officer needs to do. So, but like organization structure and culture is more of a responsibility sitting at a higher level. Because as a CISO or as a general manager in cybersecurity, we need to work out a organizational structure with security responsibilities built in each of the key stakeholders. Like even the CEO or CFO, they need to share a bit of cybersecurity responsibilities. And I know some of companies are running like security awareness campaign from time to time. So they use phishing email. They organize phishing email campaigns. So this is one typical example, of promoting a very good cybersecurity culture within organization. Right. So that's about governance. I'll move to the next one, which is about risk. Right. So firstly, sometimes people are confused with the two terms, like risk assessment and risk management. So what is risk assessment? So risk assessment is to identify and analyze the threats, vulnerabilities, and also determine their likelihood and impact to the assets. So the asset here can be referred to as workstations, servers, or even the workloads in the cloud environments, or even if you're working with OT, you probably see assets like PLCs, those actuators or sensors. They can also be the assets belonging to your organization. So it depends on your industry and how you define those assets, right? So that's about risk assessment. So risk management is all about leveraging outcomes from the risk assessment and determine a risk treatment method or risk treatment plan to manage the risk rating to an acceptable level against the organization's risk appetite. So that's all about, after we identify, the risk, after we identify the issues, we need to come up with different methods to address those risks. So there are 4 typical risk treatment methods. So first one is eliminate the risk, which is to get rid of the risk at all. So second is to transfer the risk. So I think increasingly you see now those insurance company, they offered a product called cybersecurity insurance to some of the companies. Like telecommunication, like Optus, like Telstra. I did see, some of those companies, they tend to buy those cybersecurity insurance. So that's a way of transfer the risk from the organization to an insurance company. So the third one is the risk mitigation. So this is the most typical one that I think you probably see in the workplace in the cybersecurity industry. So organization use like firewalls, they deploy IPS, they use identity and access management solution, and they also do have like pen testers to do vulnerability assessment and testing. So those are all type of mitigation controls, which aims to mitigate the risk to an acceptable level against organization risk appetite. So the last one is the risk acceptance. So we always will have a risk. So sometimes we are not able to eliminate the risk or mitigate the risk to an acceptable level. So what we have to do, so we have to accept the risk. But that's the last resort we have to consider, and it normally leads to be signed off by the senior stakeholders within an organization. That's a 4 typical risk treatment method to measure risk. So you probably ask why we need to do the risk assessment and management. So firstly, to land the strategy. So like I said, in the federal government's cybersecurity strategy, so you see that we need to protect Australian people from cyber attack, and to achieve that we need to do those 6 initiatives. But how to land that strategy? What's detailed controls, no matter it is technical controls or administrative controls, and what exactly we need to do. So that's the reason why we need to do the risk assessment and management. So we need to review the threats which are pertaining to our organization, to our context, and we assess those risks, and then we figure out what is the material risk to our business objective, and then we come up with controls to either mitigate the risk or eliminate the risk or transfer the risk. So that's why we need to do the risk assessment, which is to land the strategy. Secondly, prioritize our effort, funding, and resources, because we are not in the perfect world. We do have limited budgets. We do have limited resources. So and we have a lot of issues to deal with. Then how should we allocate our funding and resources to address those most critical issues? So that's the reason why we need to do risk assessment. So during the risk assessment, we're going to figure out, the risk with different risk rating, and that indicates that we need to allocate our funding and resources to address those higher risk, which can help the organization to better plan their efforts to address the most critical issues to the organization, which is very important. So lastly, the risk management and assessment is to derive the requirements, which can be further developed as a compliance of an organization. So we will tap on compliance later. But I want to call it out here is, we figure out those issues and those initiatives we need to do. Those things will become a requirements for an organization, and even the organization can use that to develop a compliance for each of the business unit to stick with. So that's a thought of, the reason and what is the risk management and assessment. So I'll move to the next one. So a simple formula to clarify what is risk. So as you can see, that risk is actually influenced by threats, vulnerabilities, and consequence. So people are often tend to use a more simplified formula to describe the risk. So which is a likelihood. So sometimes people say risk will be influenced by the likelihood and consequence, but the likelihood is actually influenced by the threat and the vulnerabilities. So I'm not sure if anyone is called who did the pen testing before. Do you know why we need to do pen testing? I think one of the reasons is
I know.
penetration testing.
Yeah, good point. So another reason why we need to do pen testing is, so during the risk assessment, we come up with different threat scenario with different likelihood, but all those assessments are tabletop exercise. So we don't know if when we say a hacker is gonna spread ransomware and some of the workstations can be materialized. So that's one way we need to get the pen tester to help us to validate what we say in the risk assessment. So we did them to help test those threat scenarios and to make sure that our estimate of the likelihood is accurate. So that's one of the reasons why we need to do pen testing. Right. So there are two types of risk assessment. As you can see, one is qualitative risk assessment. The other one is quantitative risk assessment. So this table below is an example of qualitative risk assessment. As you can see, it's organized by two dimensions. The one is the likelihood column. The other one is the impact scale. So let's maybe take a look at the likelihood. So the lowest one is the lowest rating is very low, and the scale is up to very high. So likewise, for impact, it's from very low to very high, and then we use this matrix to help us to determine what would be the a risk rating for specific threats. I have an example in the next slides I can show you. So maybe let's touch base on this very quick. So like I said, so when we are assessing a threat scenario, we often need to give a rating for likelihood and rating for consequence. Let's say this one is high and very high. So if we go back to this page and use this matrix, then we can determine that the risk rating is very high. So that's how a qualitative risk assessment will be conducted in the real scenario. So quantitative risk assessment is a bit more complex. It's often used by the financial industry. So they use numeral values instead of this low, moderate, and high to assess the risk. Like I said, it's very complex. You probably need to go to some of the industry goods methodology to guide your quantitative risk assessment. So one of them is called FAIR. If you do have interest, have a look at their website and their methodologies on how to conduct quantitative risk assessment. Right. Here comes to the some of the methodology I want to introduce here. So so those four items here are very common to see in the industry. So obviously, the first one is ISO 31000, ISO 27705. So I'm not sure if you know about the not sure if someone is located in Western Australia. So if you work in the government agencies, you probably are aware of this ISO 31000 because the Western Australian cybersecurity policy mandates the ISO 31000 to be as a guidance to conduct the risk assessment. And also, the other ISO standard is often very common to use to guide how to manage the risk. So this 830 is American standards, is widely used in North America, but also in other parts of the world. So 830 gives very detailed guidance on how to conduct a risk assessment. So ISO 62443, so this one is specific to OT. If you are working in an industry like mining, oil and gas, or energy, so you probably need to consider use a standard more suitable in the industry environment. So ISO 62443 is I think it's the only one that's currently being widely used in the industries. Lastly is the FIRE. FIRE is a quantitative risk assessment methodology. So if you do have any interest, go to, I think all of them are, I think list 830 is free. And for the other three, I think you can get some information, but if you want to see the full revision, you have to pay. Right. So lastly, let's take a look at the example, the risk register. So we talk about how should we do the risk management assessment. Eventually, we need to document the outcomes. We need to deliver something to our clients. So we will normally deliver that in a so-called risk register. So this is a simplified format of a risk register. So it typically includes the assets, what assets we need to protect. So let's say for this instance, with a web server, and then what would be the threat source, against the assets. So because web server is typically publicly accessible, then it can be exposed to external threats like cyber criminals. But this is not the only threat source you are running to. Normally, you will also face the internal threats. It could be like a standard users who don't have the authorization to access this asset, or it can be an internal threat, like a system administrator who has a comprehensive understanding of this asset, could be also a threat to the asset. And then what would be the threat vector? How will this threat source get into the asset? So for this example, then obviously from internet. And then what would be the vulnerabilities the threat source will leverage? So I use process scraping, which is the most common vulnerabilities that you can see in the web application. So those four elements forms the basis of a risk events. We should be able to talk that through with our clients and let them understand this risk event so that they can help us to determine the consequence. The reason why I'm not saying likelihoods is because likelihoods is really difficult to determine because it involves a lot of subjective disrelation, because it depends on the hackers' capability, also depends on their intents, or how attractive the asset is to the hackers. And also, if we do have the vulnerabilities, the known vulnerabilities on our assets. So this one is somehow, subjective. But what we can really get from the client or from the stakeholder is a consequence, because they manage those assets. They know the impact to the organization if they are not working. So typically, in the risk workshop, we need to coordinate between different stakeholders and to get their views on the consequence if this asset stops working. So the consequence can be can mean a lot. So it depends on what type of business the organization is running. So if the web server stops working, it can have obviously the financial loss, right? It also can cause the business continuity issues. If we are talking about OT, if something is not working, it might also have safety issues, health issues, or environmental issues. So that's the reason why we need to involve different stakeholders in the risk workshop to help us to determine the right consequences if this risk does happen. And then we use the risk matrix to determine, the unmitigated risk rating. So the risk matrix is different from industries or even from the companies, because each company has its own risk appetite. Sometimes, some company can accept, the risk rating which is higher than moderate. So for some critical infrastructure provider, they probably will not accept any risk rating higher than moderate. Okay. So yeah, so that's a bit of clarification on the risk management and assessment. Right, I'll move to the last one, which is the compliance. So yeah, so what is compliance? So in a simple term, that's something an organization has to follow. Otherwise, there are to be consequences. Okay, so so where does the compliance comes from? So I listed two here. So one is regulations, the other one is organizational standards. So I'll give you more details on what the regulation will look like in the next slides. But bear that in mind, the sources could be coming from regulation or organizational standards. Now, why we need compliance? Because firstly, that's a way to assure that the policies and technical controls are enforced. So we talk about policies in the first section, and so one of the issues is if our company does have a very sound policy developed, how can we assure that the people in this company are stick with those policies? So that's really important. You do have a very good documentation policy, but no one follows them, then it doesn't make any sense, right? So that's the reason why we need compliance. So that's a way to assure that the policy and those controls can be enforced. So secondly, the compliance provides a minimal level of security assurance to an organization. So those are the two, I think, the major points, why we need to have compliance. Right. So some examples in the next slides. Like I said, so we do have regulatory compliance. So those are some examples that pick up within Australia. So I'm not talking about other regulations in other regions like US or Europe. So in Australia, so from federal government perspective, they do have several compliance or security legislations. So one of them is like Security of Critical Infrastructure Act 2018. I'm not sure if anyone heard about this legislation. So this one aims to protect those critical infrastructure provider like energy, like mining, like telecommunications. So they and mandates they need to establish a CRMP, and they need to report any cyber breaches to the federal government within a defined timeline. And also, I want to introduce this one here. It's called Cybersecurity Act 2024. So, so this legislation, I think, is just passed the parliament few days ago. So be aware of this legislation. It does have several requirements to the organization, not only to the critical infrastructure provider, but also to other industries or companies, organizations. So I recommend, I encourage all of you on this call to have a look at this legislation after this call. So state government also has its compliance. So I think I mentioned this before. Western Australia cybersecurity policy. So so the Western Australian government requires all the state government agencies to be compliant with this policy. So one of the requirements within the policy is about the risk management that I said before. Then the mandates the agency to use the ISO 31000 to conduct the risk management activities. Right. So the other compliance within Western Australia is called privacy and responsible information sharing. So that's a compliance to require the agencies to share the personal information to improve the work streams within the government agencies. But not just in Western Australia. So New South Wales or Victoria government, they all do have their own compliance. They have, and so if you have interest, go to the government's website, and I think you will find them. So lastly, industry. So industry also do have the compliance well. So like for Australian energy sector, so there is a compliance called AES-CSF. I think it stands for Australia Energy Sector Cybersecurity Framework. So its mandate is all the energy provider within Australia to reach SP1. I think reach SP1 by the end of August, if I remember, this year. So if organization is not able to comply or is not able to reach the SP1 maturity level defined in these standards, they're gonna have some legal consequence and also some penalties. Right. So the other very famous compliance called essential aid. I think most of us should heard of this one before. So also it requires the state government agencies, not just state government agencies, all the government agencies to reach the level 1 maturity within essential. I think it's last year. Deadline is last year, if my memory is right. So yeah, and also for the defense has a dedicated compliance called ESPF. So it stands for Defensive Security Principle Framework. If you are familiar with ISM or you're familiar with PSPF, you should be able to know what the DSPF is talking about. But like I said, it's specifically just for defense. All right. That's a bit of introduction about the compliance. Right. So I touched base on the standards before. So also I want to introduce some of the standards here. So like I said, compliance is not just from legislation, but it's also from the standards. So some of the industry good practices like this CSF, like ISO 643 for OT, and also like ISO 27001. So which is very common for the IT environment. So also I talk about the organizational standards. So what exactly we should have as organizational standards? So that's the security policy and process. So when we develop those security policy and process, and we put them into place, into effect, then all the stuff within this within this organization is to stick with the policies and the processes. So that's a type of organizational standards. So you probably see that the governance, risk, and compliance, they are forming a looped cycle. So the input from some of them will be the output for the other. So bear that in mind. It's not the risk, the governance risk and compliance, they are not siloed, they are not standalone. So they have some connections between each other. Right. So lastly, requirements derived from the risk assessment. Like I said in the risk section, the initiatives that we develop as part of the risk assessment activities will potentially become a requirements, and those requirements can further be developed as a compliance, so that it urges for example the IT department to, for example, implement a firewall or implement a specific solution to control a specific risk. Right. I think that's all. Oh, we have another slide here. Yeah, so the job duties for compliance. So what you will run into when you are in a workplace as a compliance consultant. So obviously you're gonna do the cyber audits. I'm not sure if you heard about this OAG. So that's a government agency called Office of Auditor General. So this organization is responsible for auditing all the regulations from either federal government or state government, like AES-CSF I just mentioned. So like companies, consulting companies or auditing companies like Big Four, so they are often employed by the other industries to conduct the internal auditing or external auditing. So the The purpose here is to help the organization to assure that whatever the policy, process, and procedure or technical controls they put into place is working as expected, right? So other than security audits, I also mentioned about like gap analysis here. So gap analysis is all about to check against like the standards that I mentioned here, or the security policies that the company has, to see if there are any gap between the actual practice against the policy and standards. So so typically companies like Big Four or other security companies, they tend to use some technical approach like vulnerability assessment and pen testing to assess the gaps. But I want to say pen testing and the vulnerability assessment is not the only way to assess the gaps. We can also, by like reviewing the documentation, the security policies, or any other, this documented stuff to assess the risk. Like I said, controls is not only about technical controls. We do have administrative controls, and those security policies, process, and procedures, they are sort of a administrative controls. Okay, and we also do have like physical security controls. So which means that we can assess them by the red teaming or pen testing, or by just going on site and to review the controls being deployed there. Awesome. I think we are just about the time. So the last slide, sorry, the last slide here is about the learning paths and job hunting within the GRC space. So I would recommend you to take a look at industry good practices. Like I just said, this 800 series, the ISA 6403. If you want to learn by taking certification exams, so I would recommend you to have a look at the CISA. This CISA is actually from the ISACA CISA. It's called Certified Information Security Auditor, and also the CISM and CISP. And there's another CISA here. So so this one is, if you are doing OT, I highly recommend you to take a look at this. So this is United States Department of Homeland Security, CISA. So they offer a lot of very good free courses, but they require using a company's email to register. But if you are students, you can try using your university email address. I think you can get past. So lastly, soft skills is also very important, because as a consultant, we have to write reports. And also there will be a lot of communications with our clients. So that's the reason why we need to improve our soft skills in those spaces. So lastly, job hunting. If you are students, I recommend you study to look at any internship within the market and keep learning, and also network with the industry's professionals. If you are IT or security professionals, I would recommend you to do more networking, attend the conferences, to get to know people from LinkedIn, or even to join the community, because like this ISACA, they do have like Sydney chapter, Melbourne chapter, Perth chapter. So you can try join those chapter and to do some volunteers for this organization. So you can get a chance to know more people there. And also, soft skills is also very important. Like I said, if you're an IT professional, you should not only looking at improving your technical skills, but also your soft skills as well. Yeah, and also lastly, seek the opportunities to do more client-facing work, not just dealing with technologies. If you want to do GRC, you want to dive deep in this area, so do more customer-facing work. Okay, that's all I want to share here in this session. I'll hand over to Bella to answer questions.
Awesome. Could you please can you go back to the last slide and copy paste the learning and the job hunting into the chat? Because I think they want to know which certification or the courses they can. So can you copy paste and yeah, could you copy paste to the chat so they can have the list just for this learning path and the job hunting part. Thank you.
Right.